The Iconian Xeno Research Institute prided itself on its exhaustive Deathworlder Viability Index, a meticulous catalog of survival traits from across the galaxy's most hazardous biospheres. For decades, their data on pain response in juvenile subjects from Class G worlds and above showed near-universal patterns: immediate distress vocalizations, defensive posturing, or at best, stoic withdrawal and resource conservation. This was the immutable bedrock of their understanding. Within the cool, ambient glow of the primary observation deck, a sanctuary of shimmering holographic displays and the faint, pervasive hum of immense processing power, Chief Xenobiologist Stella adjusted one of her many intricate optical sensors. Her delicate, multi-jointed manipulators, usually tracing elegant paths across the master control interface, stilled. Analyst Krell. Her voice was calm, a carefully modulated frequency designed for clarity, yet a subtle dissonance resonated beneath its surface, an almost imperceptible tremor of disbelief. Confirmed timestamp on Observation 7. Sandian Sidian, the human juvenile, Leo. After sustaining integumentary abrasion and minor impact trauma, Analyst Krell's reply was instantaneous, his voice a stream of pure data, crisp and devoid of inflection. Confirmed. Chief Xenobiologist. Timestamp 14.73. Subject tripped, impacted unprepared. Initial vocalization consistent with distress markers. Biometric telemetry indicates acute pain signature, brief duration. Stella's primary manipulators danced across her console. A central holographic display, previously cycling through comparative xenomorphic anatomies, sharpened, zooming into the designated human enclosure. There, a small bipedal form, the human juvenile Leo, clad in brightly colored, soft-looking integument coverings, was pushing himself up from the enclosure's simulated terrestrial substrate. A distinct red abrasion was visible on one knee. The larger adult human, Robert Miller, was moving towards him, a placid expression on his face. Then, the anomaly. Leo, looking up at Miller, his small face, moments before puckered in a brief cry, suddenly split into an expression of unmistakable mirth. A clear, unrestrained giggle echoed from the audio feed. He pointed a small, 5-digited manipulator at his scraped knee, not with alarm, but with an almost performative flourish. Stella's voice cut through the sterile hum of the observation deck, the carefully constructed calm now undeniably fractured. And the subsequent primary emotional response is laughter? This deviates from every established Deathworlder juvenile trauma metric we possess. Her manipulators flew across the console with renewed urgency. Krell, initiate full diagnostic sweep. All sensor arrays, telemetry feeds, environmental buffers, human enclosure. Observation 7. Sandian Sidian corroborate all input stream. Now. Initiating Chief Xenobiologist. Krell's voice returned, unwavering. Data streams flickered across ancillary displays, diagnostic glyphs pulsing green. Moments later, all systems nominal, Chief. Data integrity confirmed. The readings are accurate. Stella remained motionless, her primary optical cluster fixed on the replaying image of the laughing human child. Her internal processors whirred, a silent storm of cognitive dissonance. Deathworlder evolution, she thought, the logic pathways illuminated in her mind's eye, it optimizes for survival. Threat mitigation. Pain is a crucial deterrent. A signal for immediate behavioral modification, for resource conservation, for retreat or defense. Laughter, it expends vital energy. It broadcasts location to potential predators. It serves no discernible protective function in this immediate context. It is catastrophically illogical. A soft chime announced an incoming audio transmission from the human enclosure liaison interface. Robert Miller's voice, warm, relaxed, and utterly unscientific, filled the observation deck. Everything okay up there? Leo's all right, just took a little tumble. Kids bounce back, you know. Part of the job description, I suppose. Stella's head tilted, a minute, almost mechanical motion. A new data tag, small and unobtrusive, appeared beside Leo's behavioral log. Anecdotal. Parental reassurance. Non-quantifiable. Dismiss. She activated a secure, multinodal communication channel. Specialist consultation, priority alpha. Holographic representations of two other senior Iconian scientists shimmered into existence before her xenopsychologist Vreen, whose optical arrays were wider, designed for observing subtle behavioral cues, and juvenile physiologist Tarn, whose own form was gracile, adapted to research within delicate zero-gravity nurseries. Stella presented the anomaly, the raw data, the visual evidence. The exchange was rapid, a cascade of Iconian scientific lexicon. Neurochemical misfire? Vreen posited, his own sensors pulsing. A paradoxical pleasure-pain linkage unique to Homo sapiens? Highly improbable without corresponding physiological markers of systemic dysfunction. Perhaps a de-escalation display, Tarn offered. A mimicry of non-threat signals observed in some pre-sapient pack species? But the energy expenditure is disproportionate, the context inappropriate. Could it be a catastrophic failure in emotional regulation? Vreen mused. Indicative of inherent species-wide instability? Stella's primary optical sensor narrowed. Insufficient. All hypotheses fail to account for the coherence of the positive emotional valence. The laughter is not random, it is contextualized, however alien that context may be. She deactivated the consultation, the holographic figures winking out of existence. Her posture, if an Iconian could be said to possess such a thing, straightened. A new, hard tenacity settled into the intricate patterns of her bioluminescent tracery. The Deathworlder juvenile pain response matrix, she stated, her voice resonating with the profound weight of the implication, as it pertains to Homo sapiens, is demonstrably incomplete. Or, far more disturbingly, fundamentally flawed. Her gaze returned to Leo's image, the sound of his laughter so incongruous, replaying in an infinite loop. This deviation requires immediate, dedicated, high-priority investigation. Her gaze swept across the silent, gleaming arrays of the observation deck, each display a testament to millennia of Iconian scientific endeavor. If our understanding of a designated Deathworlder species is so erroneous at this foundational level, if we can misinterpret something as fundamental as a physiological and psychological response to physical trauma, then what else have we missed? The integrity of the entire viability index could be compromised. Galactic policy, interstellar threat assessments, diplomatic protocols, all potentially predicated on dangerously incomplete data. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the persistent, quiet hum of the Institute's core. Stella's focus returned, sharp and intense, to the image of Robert Miller, now calmly examining Leo's scraped knee. Passive observation and internal correlation are no longer sufficient. Her intricate manipulators made a decisive input on her console. Analyst Krell, schedule a formal consultation with human liaison Robert Miller. Subject, anomaly 7,3. 4 unidentified post-trauma emotional response in juvenile Homo sapiens. Objective, to ascertain the biological, psychological, or socio-cultural function, if any, of laughter. In a Deathworlder context, her multifaceted optical sensors gleamed, not with confusion now, but with a focused, almost predatory, intellectual curiosity. The true study of humanity, it seemed, had only just begun. Chief Xenobiologist Stella initiated the secure consultation link. The primary analysis chamber, a space of cool, pulsating light and silent data streams, felt suddenly warmer, less sterile, as the face of Robert Miller commitment on the central holoproject. Behind him, visible through the transparent wall of the human enclosure, a small human figure, Leo, could be seen actively engaged in what Iconian protocols provisionally labeled unstructured environmental interaction. Analyst Krell, a younger Iconian whose optical sensors flickered with focused intensity, positioned himself beside a data console, mandibles clicking softly, ready to log the exchange. Liaison Miller, Stella began, her voice a low, resonant hum, devoid of inflection save for the precise placement of each syllable. Her intricate optical sensors, clusters of light-gathering nodes, focused intently on Robert. We require your input regarding observation log 7.3. 4, timestamp 9. 41. 3, local cycle. A series of holographic displays shimmered into existence, between them graphs charting biometric data, a short video loop of Leo's tumble, the brief spike in pain indicators, followed by the anomaly, the clear, unmistakable sound and visual representation of juvenile human laughter. As you can observe, Stella continued, gesturing with a delicate manipulator arm towards the data, the subject experienced a calculated low-level physical trauma event. The initial vocalization and physiological response were within predicted parameters for a Class 7 Deathworlder juvenile. However, the subsequent affective display, the laughter, represents a 6 sigma deviation from all established data in the Deathworlder Viability Index. Robert Miller watched the loop play, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He glanced back towards Leo for a moment, then returned his gaze to Stella. "Yeah, I saw that, Stella," he said, his voice calm and relaxed, a stark contrast to the chamber's intensity. He tripped. Kids do that when they're learning to coordinate. It surprised him, probably hurt for a second, hence the cry. But then he realized he was fine, saw me right there, and, well, he laughed. That's pretty normal for a human kid. It's like shaking it off, letting go of the scare. Krell's mandibles clicked rapidly. Data streams beside him updated, attempting to parse Robert's colloquialism. Stella's optical sensors narrowed slightly. "Normal?" she echoed. "Our analysis categorizes the fall as low-level, non-lethal trauma exposure. His subsequent motor adjustments indicate kinesthetic environmental mapping, but the laughter, it lacks a clear survival function within this sequence. It expends energy, could potentially attract unwanted attention in a natural habitat. How does a species from a high-threat environment justify such a response immediately post-trauma? What is its evolutionary purpose?" Robert leaned back slightly, considering her question. "Kids play, Stella. They run, they climb, they tumble. It's how they build muscle, figure out balance, test limits, little falls, scrapes, bumps, they're just feedback. Part of the learning process, like running simulations, but physical. You try something, it doesn't work perfectly, you get a little ding, you learn, and you try again differently." Stella tilted her head, a gesture Iconians used when processing complex, non-linear information. "Play," she repeated, the word sounding alien in her precise articulation. "Unstructured, risk-prone activity driven by internal states. You classify this as a deliberate, beneficial survival strategy?" "Our models favor efficient, direct conditioning or innate, hardwired responses. This play seems inefficient." Krell displayed comparative data. Images of juvenile Growlax who, after a similar tumble in their simulated habitat, would immediately retreat, exhibit prolonged threat displays towards the perceived source of the trauma, the ground, and isolate themselves for extended periods. The contrast was stark, almost jarring. "It's not just about enduring pain stoically," Robert explained, his tone patient. "Human resilience is also about recovery, bouncing back. The cry is the initial pain and surprise. The laughter? That's often the relief, the signal, 'I'm okay, it wasn't serious,' both to themselves and to whoever is watching. It's a release of tension. It helps them process the minor stressor and get back to, well, back to playing and learning." New hypotheses flickered across Krell's consoles. Possibility. The laughter is a complex, unconscious, defensive mimicry, designed to appear non-threatening to a potential predator observing the trauma event, Krell suggested, his voice a low buzz. Or, it is a learned social behavior entirely disconnected from survival value, indicating poor evolutionary optimization in the juvenile phase? "No, it's not mimicry or maladaptation," Robert countered gently. "It's integrated. The physical sensation, the emotional response, the cognitive processing, they're all linked. Laughter, especially after a scare, helps regulate the nervous system. It reinforces the lesson. I fell, it hurt, but I recovered quickly. And look, I'm fine. It makes the learning stick, makes them less afraid to try again. It's part of why we're adaptable. We learn from mistakes, even painful ones, and we don't let the minor ones shut us down." Driven by Stella's instructions, Krell attempted to quantify this. New metrics were generated. Effective recovery coefficient, post-trauma hedonic index, kinesthetic learning integration efficacy. Data streams flowed, algorithms churned. attempting to find predictable correlations between physical trauma, emotional state shifts, and subsequent learning behaviors in the human subject. The results were messy, inconsistent, riddled with variables that refused to fit neat curves or linear progressions. Error messages flashed in subtle amber hues on Krell's console. "Chief Xenobiologist," Krell reported, his voice tinged with frustration. "The data remains non-compliant. The patterns are fluid." Subject Leo's response varies based on proximity to adult humans, prior activity, even ambient light levels. Quantification is proving elusive. Stella's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Her optical sensors focused and refocused on the chaotic data displays. Robert's explanation made intuitive sense, a narrative logic that resonated on some non-quantifiable level, but it refused to translate into the rigorous, predictable framework of the Deathworlder Viability Index. The gap between human experience and Iconian scientific definition felt vast. The data. It resists categorization, Stella stated, the frustration clear in the subtle shifts of her bioluminescent pattern. "Your explanations are consistent, Liaison Miller, but they lack the quantifiable, evolutionary-driven markers we require. We understand what the subject is doing and how you describe it. But the fundamental why, in terms of a universally applicable survival metric, remains undefined." Robert nodded slowly, understanding her struggle. "Maybe the environment is too controlled, Stella," he offered. "Leo's just reacting to a static floor here. Humans don't evolve in sterile boxes. We evolve dealing with uneven ground, unpredictable weather, other creatures, other people. Maybe you need to see how these things, the falling and getting up, the playing, the laughing it off, how they fit together in a more dynamic situation. How they prepare us for things that aren't just a simple tumble." Stella paused, her gaze drifting towards the monitor showing the human enclosure, no longer just a data source but a complex, living system. Robert's words resonated. The controlled variables, the very foundation of their isolationist study methods, might be stripping away the context essential to understanding human adaptability. They were observing isolated notes, not the symphony. The knowledge gap wasn't just in the data, it was in their fundamental approach to observation. "A dynamic environment," Stella mused, the concept sparking new pathways in her analytical mind. "Interaction, unpredictability." Yes. She turned back to Krell, her posture regaining its clinical authority, now tempered with a new direction. "Analyst Krell, suspend attempts to apply existing metrics. Initiate development of a revised observation protocol. Focus on scenarios incorporating dynamic environmental factors and intersubject interaction. We need to observe humans, in motion." She looked back at Robert. "Liaison Miller, the Institute will be developing proposals for revised observation methods, potentially involving more complex scenarios within the enclosure, or perhaps controlled simulations. We need to understand the function of this play and the resulting emotional responses, not as anomalies, but as integrated components of human viability. We need a test case that reveals the deeper why." The call concluded, the holo projector flickering off, leaving Stella once again in the cool, sterile silence of the analysis chamber, the chaotic human data still shimmering on the displays. A profound, baffling challenge to everything she thought she knew about Deathworlders. The next phase of study would require looking beyond the fall, beyond the laughter, into the very heart of what it meant to be human. Chief Xenobiologist Stella convened her core research team in the primary analysis chamber, the air thick with the low thrum of processors and the faint, metallic scent of Iconian technology. Before them, holographic displays shimmered, replaying the anomaly. The human juvenile, Leo, tumbling, the brief spike of distress, and then the inexplicable, vibrant laughter. "Analyst Krell?" Stella's voice was a precise series of clicks and modulated tones. "Present the proposed protocols for dynamic observation. Our previous static analyses are insufficient to capture the full spectrum of the human juvenile's response profile." Krell, a smaller Iconian with multiple, rapidly blinking optical sensors, adjusted a display. "Chief Xenobiologist, initial proposals focus on controlled stimuli. Scenario 7 Alpha. Subject placed on unstable platform, measuring balance correction and fall impact kinematics. Scenario 7 Beta. Introduction of non-injurious, low-intensity thermal variants on epidermal layer, monitoring withdrawal reflex and vocalization. The simulations on the display showed sterile, clinical tests a small, featureless figure on a tilting disc, a limb exposed to a localized light source. They were designed to isolate variables, to elicit predictable, measurable responses. They were designed for anything but a human child. A low murmur rippled through the assembled Iconians. Another analyst, Unit 9, projected a risk assessment model. Chief Stella, while the proposed stimuli are classified as non-injurious to Class 7 Deathworlder physiology, the unpredictable emotional component observed in subject Leo introduces variables outside our standard safety parameters. Protocol 4 requires minimizing subject agency to prevent anomalous outcomes. The debate was quiet but intense, focused entirely on mitigating risk and maintaining control, their own species' deep-seated aversion to physical vulnerability coloring their every calculation. "We must consult the human liaison," Stella stated, overriding the risk models. Robert Miller's cultural context is required to validate these scenarios. Later, in a sterile consultation cell overlooking the vibrant, contained ecosystem of the human enclosure, Stella presented the clinical proposals to Robert Miller. Holographic schematics of tilting platforms and thermal emitters floated between them. Robert watched the simulations, a faint, unreadable expression on his face. "Stella," he said finally, his voice warm and resonant, a stark contrast to the Iconians' modulated clicks. These aren't how kids learn to be resilient. This is clinical, artificial." He gestured towards the enclosure where Leo was currently attempting to climb a small, padded structure, falling with a soft thud, scrambling up again. "They need to interact with the world. They need to push their limits, figure out what happens when they trip on uneven ground or skin a knee climbing. They need play." The Iconians present exchanged confused visual signals. "Play?" Krell queried, the word sounding alien in his vocalizer. "The expenditure of significant energy on activities with no immediate resource acquisition or threat avoidance objective? How is this adaptive for a species from a Class 7 biosphere?" Stella, drawing upon her rapidly expanding dataset, offered context, though it seemed to deepen the confusion. "Our own developmental biology, Liaison Miller, dictates extreme caution. Iconian larval and juvenile stages are exquisitely sensitive to physical trauma. Any significant impact during early neural formation can result in irreversible cognitive impairment. Our creches are optimized, zero-risk environments. The concept of deliberately engaging in activities where minor injury is a probable outcome is antithetical to our survival programming." Despite the cultural chasm, Stella pressed her team to model Robert's concept. Holographic simulations now showed chaotic, dynamic scenes of human children running, climbing, falling. The Iconian models struggled. They could track kinetic energy, impact force, epidermal abrasion data. But the rapid return to baseline physiological markers, the inexplicable positive vocalizations post-trauma, the sheer inefficiency of it all from a pure survival standpoint, it broke their algorithms. The models flagged it as erratic, unpredictable, non-optimal. Skepticism filtered back from other departments. A formal query arrived, routed through Krell. "Chief Stella, the Deathworlder Viability Index relies on quantifiable metrics of physical endurance and threat response. Your focus on emotional recovery and unstructured activity deviates significantly from established protocol and lacks empirical support in cross-species data." Stella's optical sensors narrowed. She addressed her team, her voice firm. "The magnitude of the human deviation is the empirical data. Their response is not erratic. It is a form of resilience our metrics fail to capture. Our models are incomplete because they do not account for this variable." Robert, sensing her frustration, offered a different perspective. "It's not just about physical conditioning, Stella. It's about building confidence, learning to assess risk, understanding that a little pain isn't the end of the world, and fun." He paused, searching for the right analogy. "Think of fun as the evolutionary reward signal. It encourages them to explore, to push boundaries, to learn adaptability in a low-stakes environment. It builds psychological toughness. The Iconians grappled with the concept. Psychological toughness? Krell echoed, his sensors blinking rapidly. How do we assign a quantifiable value to confidence or excitement within the viability index? These are not measurable physiological responses to external stimuli. The struggle to integrate intrinsic motivation into their empirical framework was evident, a fundamental clash of worldviews. Integrating Robert's insights with her own scientific rigor, Stella proposed a compromise. "We will construct a dynamic observation environment," she announced, "an age-appropriate obstacle course within the enclosure. It will simulate varied surfaces, require balance and coordination, and present opportunities for minor controlled falls." Engineered risk. Parameters were meticulously defined with Robert. Padded landing zones, height restrictions calibrated to juvenile human size, materials chosen to minimize abrasion while feeling real, a dense network of multi-spectral sensors, kinesthetic trackers, biomonitors, and high-speed cameras covering every angle. Immediate intervention protocols for any sign of significant distress were agreed upon. The Iconian team mobilized. Drones and articulated manipulators descended into the human enclosure, their movements precise and efficient. Gleaming metal structures were assembled, vibrant, soft padding laid down, intricate sensor arrays woven into the very fabric of the environment. The construction was a marvel of sterile technological precision, building a structure designed for messy, unpredictable human play. As the final sensors came online, Stella stood before the holographic schematic of the completed course. She addressed her team, her voice regaining its scientific certainty, now tempered with a new kind of anticipation. The hypothesis is as follows. Can controlled dynamic physical engagement, characteristic of human play, produce measurable increases in adaptive resilience and emotional recovery speed, thereby contributing to their overall Deathworlder viability in ways our current physiological metrics fail to capture? The obstacle course stood ready, a complex structure of ramps, tunnels, and padded climbing frames. The observation chamber was quiet, monitors displaying the empty course, awaiting its occupants. The Iconian team was in position, sensors calibrated, recording protocols active. The stage was set. Error. Content tag, content part 4, not found in response. Raw text length, 8,292 characters. Chief xenobiologist Stella meticulously reviewed the final data streams. The patterns were undeniable, starkly visible across the holographic displays in her private analysis chamber. Biometric readings from the human juvenile, Leo, during the obstacle course trials showed not just physical recovery from minor impacts and abrasions, but a rapid, statistically significant return to baseline stress levels and, critically, a swift shift back to positive emotional indicators, often accompanied by the very vocalization that had initiated this investigation, laughter. This wasn't an isolated incident. Cross-reference data from other human children in similar controlled environments, and even observational data from adult humans navigating unexpected minor disruptions like the recent station gravity fluctuation painted the same picture. Rapid psychological processing, swift emotional recovery, a return to function, often punctuated by expressions of amusement or lightheartedness. Stella correlated this consistent pattern directly with the human concept of play-based learning and inherent emotional adaptability. It wasn't merely physical toughness, though that was present. It was a dynamic, internal system of engaging with minor adversity, processing it quickly, recovering, and integrating the experience. This, she concluded, was a core, previously unquantified component of human Deathworlder survival strategy. They didn't just endure hardship, they learned from it, adapted to it, and normalized it with astonishing speed. It was a form of resilience her species, and indeed, most galactic species, had never conceived of. Recognizing the radical nature of her findings that challenged millennia of established Deathworlder metrics rooted in stoicism and physical endurance, Stella prepared a formal presentation to the Iconian Grand Scientific Conclave. She anticipated significant intellectual resistance. The conclave, composed of the most ancient and respected scientific minds of her species, valued precedent and rigorous, established framework. To suggest that laughter and play were fundamental survival traits on par with bone density or toxin resistance would be met with profound skepticism. The day arrived. The conclave chamber was a vast, echoing space of polished obsidian and shimmering light patterns, filled with the silent, imposing forms of the elder Iconians. Stella stood before them, a lone figure against the weight of ages. She began her presentation, detailing the anomaly of Leo's laughter post-fall, presenting the cold, hard data from the human juvenile obstacle course trials, showing the graphs of rapid emotional recovery. She then showed the observational records from the station malfunction, highlighting the unexpected human composure and adaptive, often unconventional, problem-solving observed during a non-lethal but stressful event. She argued that human resilience was not merely physical endurance or emotional suppression, which the Iconians understood. It was an active, dynamic process of engagement, recovery, and adaptation. She projected recordings of human children falling and laughing, of adults making light of stressful situations. This behavior, she asserted, was not a sign of instability, but a mechanism for rapid stress inoculation and psychological recovery. It was, she stated, a strength. Several elder Iconian scientists voiced skepticism, their synthesized voices resonating with the weight of millennia of data that prioritized physical and emotional stoicism as the singular hallmark of Deathworlder survival. A venerable Iconian, their form a complex lattice of crystalline structures, projected a countergraph showing the flat, unchanging emotional response of a juvenile Gorokian, another Class G species. After a similar trauma, this, the Venerable stated, is the expected response of a species forged in lethal environments. Suppression of pain, conservation of emotional energy. The human data suggests volatility. Stella directly refuted the skepticism using the empirical data she had compiled. Venerable, she responded, her voice steady. The Gorokian response demonstrates endurance. The human response demonstrates adaptability. While the Gorokian conserves energy by suppressing, the human expends energy in recovery, but is then immediately ready to re-engage, to learn, to find a new solution. The data from the station incident is clear. The human response, while seemingly illogical by our standards of stoicism, proved highly effective in maintaining function and finding novel solutions under pressure, precisely because they did not become paralyzed by the stress or the minor physical discomfort involved. She highlighted that play, previously dismissed by Iconian science as inefficient energy expenditure lacking clear survival purpose, was revealed by the data to be foundational training for this adult adaptability and risk assessment. It was, she argued, a continuous, low-stakes simulation environment preparing the human mind and body for high-stakes reality. Slowly, subtly, the rigid forms of key members of the conclave began to shift. Optical sensors focused intently on Stella's data displays. Mandibles clicked, not in dissent, but in contemplation. They acknowledged the validity of Stella's empirical data. The numbers did not lie. And the logical consistency of her revised hypothesis, while challenging their foundational understanding, began to resonate. The data showed that the human approach, though alien, worked. After a period of silent, collective deliberation that felt like an age, the grand scientific conclave formally voted. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, followed by a synthesized voice announcing the decision. The conclave voted to incorporate Stella's findings into the Deathworlder Viability Index. New metrics for psychological resilience, emotional adaptability, and stress recovery, based on the comprehensive human data, would be developed and included. It was a paradigm shift of monumental proportions. News of the index revision circulated rapidly through the Iconian Institute. Datapads glowed with the announcement. Conversations ceased as scientists processed the implications. A fundamental shift in the understanding of Class G species, particularly humans, was underway, driven by data that began with a child's stumble. Robert Miller received formal notification on his personal datapad. He read the concise, technical summary of the conclave's decision regarding the human data and the revised index. A quiet smile touched his lip. Later that cycle, Stella sought out Robert near the human enclosure observation deck. The usual hum of the Institute felt different, lighter somehow. They stood side by side, looking at the vibrant, messy habitat where human children played. The conclave approved the revisions, Stella stated, her voice lacking its usual clinical detachment. There was a subtle resonance of something new. I saw the notification, Robert replied, his gaze on the enclosure. It's significant, Stella, for your work, for humanity. They shared a moment acknowledging the significance of the outcome, the validation of human nature, not through diplomacy or conflict, but through rigorous alien science. To think, Robert said softly, that it started with Leo tripping and laughing at a scraped knee. He chuckled, a low, warm sound. A small thing, really. Just a kid being a kid. He looked at Stella, his eyes full of quiet pride. But I suppose sometimes the smallest things can show you the biggest truths. Stella turned her intricate optical sensors back to the enclosure. Leo was visible, chasing a ball, stumbling slightly on the uneven terrain, catching himself and continuing on without missing a beat, a bright, clear laugh echoing from the speakers. She observed him, no longer seeing an anomaly, a statistical deviation, or an illogical data point. She saw a living embodiment of the complex, dynamic, powerful resilience now formally recognized by Iconian science. The Deathworlder who fell, and laughed, and got back up.